Good evening. I call the March 2nd, 2016 meeting of the Brattleboro Selectboard to order. Has the meeting been officially warned?
Yes.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm David Gardenstein, Chair of the Select Board. I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight to talk with us about the Police Fire Facilities Project. I want to start by introducing everybody who's up here and thanking people for their work on this project. Members of the board who are sitting with us right now: Kate O'Connor, John Allen, Donna Macomber, Town Manager Peter Ewell, Fire Chief Mike Bucossi, Police Chief Mike Fitzgerald. I also want to thank a number of other town employees who played a very significant role in what's going to be presented to you tonight. The first assistants at both police and fire, Mark Carrigan and Peter Lynch. And I also want to specifically thank Russell Rice for all of his substantial work as we were evaluating properties where we might be moving and assessing what would be appropriate expenses to take on if we were going to be moving the police station out of downtown. Dave Scholes, who is also on town school board and select board, is at a school board meeting right next door, and I expect he'll be joining us any minute, but I thought we would start right up since we've got everybody here. I also want to thank everybody for participating in caucuses. I hope that we were successful in filling a series of those open seats. We will be having additional caucus a week from tonight on the 9th of March, again here at Academy School, when we have the town meeting, informational meeting, where we'll talk primarily about budget and other issues that'll be on our town meeting on March 19th. Also, in case anybody is looking for another meeting to attend, 2 weeks from tonight, on Wednesday, March 16th, the town school board will be having its informational meeting, also in anticipation of the March 19 town meeting, which will both address the town business and town school district business. For tonight's purposes, we're going to begin with presentation about what's proposed in terms of the police fire facilities project. I'll probably talk somewhere between 6 or 7 and 15 minutes. Mr. Ewell will then speak probably the same length of time. What I'm going to try to cover is the historical background a little bit, and then the process that the select board went through over the course of, I think it was 14 meetings this fall, leading to the recommendation we've made and the town meeting that's scheduled for March 12th. Then Peter will speak broadly about his assessment of the needs of the town and the work that he did in assessing various alternatives for the police fire facilities, and then the recommendations that we're presenting to you specifically in terms of the detail of the plans that you'll be voting on a week from this coming Saturday. We'll then take whatever questions and whatever comments anybody has, and we'll stay just as long as it takes in order to try to answer all those questions and to hear all of those comments. I think everybody knows that we've been looking at the police fire facilities issues for 20 or 30 years. Most recently, we made it a goal of Select Board 4 years ago to try to get the police fire facilities renovation project back on track. So that would have been March of 2012, right after the worst of our work recovering from Irene and the Brooks House fire had passed. And it was over the course of the next 5, 6, 7 months in 2012 that work was done internally to try to put plans together. And a Black River Design architect firm from Central Vermont had developed plans and had recommended that we do the work at the 3 locations where the facilities are currently sited. And they had a plan that was around $18 million, if I recall correctly, to do the work. And together, we focused on those plans, brought them down to $14 million, and then presented those plans in a series of informational meetings, and then at a town meeting in October 2012. And we got authority from town meeting in October 2012 to do $14.1 million worth of work on the 2 fire stations and the police station in their current locations. And we took out the first $5 million of borrowing and started doing that work. We had a citizens committee that was doing the oversight. We hired the project manager, our representative, Steve Horton, who's here tonight, along with the architect firm, Ray Giolito's firm out of Keene, and then made a decision about whether we were going to use construction manager or general contractor oversight, and hired a construction manager. And we were very close to having shovel-ready plans in 2014, in the spring of 2014, and we were getting ready to borrow the second $9 million, or the rest of the $9 million. It would have brought us to $14 million to be able to construct the project. And we got through town meeting with the budget, but as many of you will remember, at referendum, the budget was rejected in like April of 2014. And we went through a very difficult time trying to see how we could represent the budget, but also ultimately, we didn't have the stomach for cuts in services here in town. And we decided to take the money for the project out of the budget and to look back at it when the new town manager was hired and came on board. So Peter Ewell was hired in January of 2015. He started working here. And we asked him to, as part of the work he was doing, I mean, he needed to get up to speed on what all of the town business is. And part of that work was really getting familiar with the work that the police and fire departments do. And we asked him to assess those needs carefully and to look at all of the work that had been done to date in making plans for police fire, and then to make his best recommendation based on all his training and all his experience and his assessment of the needs of the town about what we should do with respect to the police and fire facilities. And Peter came back to us, I want to say in the summer initially of 2015, and began discussing with us real estate option related issues that we couldn't talk about in public because we were looking at the possibility of purchasing property. Ultimately, 5 alternatives were presented to Selectboard in the early fall of 2015 about how we could move forward with police fire. There was a bare minimum plan that would just address life safety issues. It would have just spent the money that had already been borrowed. There was another alternative that I think was called minimum prudent plan that would have addressed the basic life safety issues and some other things that really, really needed to be done, but still, it would have needed us to be back at doing renovation work at police fire probably within 5 or 10 years. It would have just brought us up barely to current requirements. And then there were 3 alternatives that were presented for doing complete renovations, what I would generally call a generational approach to the police fire work. One of them was at the current locations, fire stations at their same locations, and then the police station in the municipal center, but with costs reduced from what had been approved in 2012. So for example, at Central Fire, what's being contemplated now does not involve building a 3rd story on the addition. And it saves us a good chunk of money. And in the end, it appeared to be operationally just as good or better than what was approved in 2012 at a little bit less expense. We also, as part of that recommendation, we're looking at cutting some of the costs for the renovations at the municipal center. But another alternative also was presented, which was to move the police station up to property on Putney Road, Black Mountain Road, where the reformer currently is located. And we spent time negotiating an option agreement that allows us to purchase that property on Black Mountain Road. And we've costed out what it would be to build the police station from scratch into the Brattleboro Reformer building. And at this point, the board having considered all of those alternatives, the current cost going forward, given that we have already spent about $900,000 in preparation, purchasing property at Central Fire to expand that facility, developing plans and the like for all three of the facilities, is, as referenced at the very beginning of the materials that have been handed out tonight, would be $4.1 million going forward at Black Mountain Road, $6.2 million at Central Fire, and $1.5 million at West Brattleboro, for a total cost going forward of $11.8 million, and a total cost overall, given the money that we've spent, of about $12.7 million. We've looked at financing alternatives, and that's a decision that doesn't have to be made in terms of financing until after approval for the bonding is given by the town meeting. But we do have materials in the handouts about what would be the tax impact of borrowing that money over 20, 25, or 30 years and paying it back over that time period. Some concerns have been raised about whether it's in the best interest of the town to move the police station up to Putney Road. And I tend to think that's the issue that's going to be most in focus for discussion, both tonight and at our town meeting on March 12th. And the reasons I say that are that the need for this work is really just beyond dispute. We've known it for decades that the work needs to be done. And we had a town meeting in October 2012 where there just wasn't any question. The big issue in the October 2012 meeting was whether we were going to raise some of the money for it doing a 1% local option sales tax. And I don't really know that there's anybody who's here who's reasonably going to question whether we really have to do the work. And we've been through it at Selectboard, and we've been through it at more than a dozen public meetings. That doesn't really appear to be the issue. And the scope of the work at the two fire stations is very, very similar to what previously was approved. Other than taking the third story off Central, the plans for West Brattleboro are essentially the same as what we were going to go forward with 2 years ago. And Central is essentially the same, except taking off the third floor, which saves us a little bit of money. And so really the core question is, do we move up to Putney Road with the police station? What I will say about the genesis of the suggestion to move the police station up to Putney Road is that it started with the police department and the police department personnel in the first instance. So if there are concerns among the citizens as a whole about the police department's ability to provide effective police services to the town of Brattleboro, the police department believes and has represented to us and has concluded based upon their analysis that they can provide services to the town as a whole and all parts of the town as effectively from Putney Road as from downtown. And people should ask those questions, but the idea to move the PD up to Putney Road came from the police department. And as people have raised this issue with me, including yesterday while I stood in the cold for 8 or 9 hours, one of the clearest responses I was able to give is that what many people don't realize is that at present, police response comes from officers who are on patrol. On every shift, there are 3, I believe, patrol officers who are assigned to be in their vehicles essentially at all times in the 3 different sectors into which Brattleboro is divided. And so responses to calls for service, although they come from the dispatch panel at the police department, go to officers who are in sectors of town in their vehicles already. And so responses to calls come from a mobile police force. And that won't change from the station being downtown as opposed to the station being up on Putney Road. So there's been concern about additional travel cost. Based upon everything I understand, there's not really going to be additional travel costs, not materially that we're aware of, because response is already from people who are out in the community providing these services. The board voted 4-1 to recommend the Putney Road alternative. So it wasn't a unanimous vote. There are very legitimate concerns about having the station downtown and the vitality downtown. But overall, the board has concluded that the best alternative for the town that's most in the public interest is moving forward with the police station up on Putney Road. And that's really, I think, the topic for discussion. I'm going to take the mic back up after Peter speaks to talk about the specific issue that's on for decision on March 12th, particularly the wording of the ballot item. But I'm now going to ask Peter to speak about his work assessing the public safety needs of the town and how those are best met by the proposal that's before you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And good evening, everyone. The perspective that David just provided in terms of the long road that we've traveled is full of a lot of important and accurate detail. And the sub-piece I'm going to speak to is about the work that we did first as a staff and then we went along into the summer and into the fall collaboratively with the professionals who had been hired by the town and then eventually with the select board in shaping the recommendation that's come before you tonight and for your action a week from Saturday. I want to stress, though, that both related to what the chairman spoke to and what I'm going to speak to, we're hitting the highlights. We're sort of telling the TV news version, but the half-hour documentary is embedded in your briefing booklets that you've received tonight. And I want to urge everybody to take that deeper dive. There are 2 PowerPoint presentations that are part of the briefing booklet. One will show you from the work that we did during the summer and presented in the fall what the alternatives were and some details around each one of those at a time when the decisions were still being considered and wrestled with in terms of what would be the best course forward. And then the more recent one nearer to the front of the book is a PowerPoint that we've been making in the community at recent meetings related to the actual recommendation that's before you as representative town meeting and why the recommendation is for the Black Mountain Road alternative. So the PowerPoints provide a good summary. There'll be a little bit more information in them than what we're able to say verbally tonight. Importantly, though, behind them is a series of memorandums and lots of attachments with rich detail of what was considered by the select board at meeting after meeting after meeting through from the end of last summer through till now. and the recommendation that they made to go to Black Mountain Road with the police department. And so we really want to urge you to look at those materials, and over the next week or so, if it raises additional questions for you beyond what we discussed tonight, please call me and allow me, or call a select board member, call one of the chiefs, whoever it is that you might have a question you want to direct to. We want to make sure that everybody has all your questions answered and you're fully informed and ready to take action a week from Saturday. The reason that we are recommending the Black Mountain Road alternative is twofold. On the one hand, it is a financial motivation. The capital cost is $1 million less than the reduced scope for the municipal center. And together with the reductions that we've made in the fire program, the combined project now is $2 million less than if we went ahead and built all three of these facilities, built out them in accordance with what had been previously approved back in 2013. So we have found savings. We've found ways to reduce the amount of work that needs to be done and still meet the long-term operating needs of the two departments. The municipal center alternative is viable. If in the final analysis the community decides that, despite the assurances that you've heard from the chairman of the select board, that you're going to hear from me, that you're going to hear from Chief Fitzgerald, regarding the police department being able to protect the community more than adequately from Black Mountain Road. If the consensus is that you still want to have a downtown police station, I want to tell you that the alternative to do this work at the municipal center is still viable. We have, in the work that we've done in reducing the overall scope of this work, pushed a lot of that program back into the building. We've been able to eliminate the upper floor of the addition, so there was to be a two-story addition into the parking lot behind the municipal center. Instead, we'll be reusing the basement area there if we need to resort to that alternative. And the footprint of the addition would be the same, but the massing of it out into the parking lot would be less. We don't think that's the best course of action. We think that that's an acceptable course of action if that ends up being the only one that the community will support. But it costs $1 million more in upfront capital costs, and it doesn't meet all of the needs of the police department. It meets most of the needs of the police department, but there are some things that, because of the age of the building and the configuration of the building, just can't be met as adequately in terms of the flow of the work of the department and the communication between different segments of the department. We can't accommodate that as well at the municipal center as we can at Black Mountain Road. At Black Mountain Road, we'll have a building that's only 35 years old, that's in good condition, that is wide open on the inside because it's been a newsroom. So it lends itself to a very cost-effective renovation to convert the space into what the police department needs. And it would all be on one floor where the movement and communication between the different parts of the department would be efficient and would lend to just help them do their work in protecting the community better. Now, that's the work that they do inside the building. They do need a headquarters, even though the responses to calls happens from out in the community. But having stressed the $1 million of savings and the better functionality of the Black Mountain Road alternative, I do want to reiterate what Mr. Gartenstein said about the fact that in the direct moment of need interaction that each one of us has when we call for help from the police department, we get that help more than 2/3 of the time from someone who's been out patrolling, is at that moment out patrolling the community in a vehicle. So it is the vast majority of the time that the response time for the police department is dictated by how well they are canvassing the community in their patrol activities. That's distinct from fire station locations, which are critically important to making sure that fire trucks rolling out of a station to a fire scene can get to all the different parts of the community in as fast a time as possible, and distinct from how Rescue Inc. Responds from its station up near Exit 1 to get as quickly as it can to where the call is. For all different kinds of reasons related to the way the work of fire and EMS departments is done and the types of vehicles that are used and so on and so forth, they respond mostly from their stations. But for the police department, the work involves a tremendous amount of time out in the community, interacting with the community, patrolling the community to keep eyes on all the different parts of town. And so we are completely confident that in the normal course of business, you could count on the police department to protect us as well from Black Mountain Road as they do from the municipal center. But especially with the awareness of the community concern around this, the chief can speak later this evening if you'd like to hear more detail about it, about the plans that he and Captain Kerrigan and the other leaders in the department already have for making sure that that deployment of the patrol resources is required to maintain the presence downtown and out in the community, and not have people spend even as much time in the station at Black Mountain Road as they spend in the station at the municipal center. Some technological improvements that are being put into the vehicles that allow the officers to do more of their work from out in the community, and also some deployment decisions about things like, for instance, making sure that there would always, at all times, be a cruiser and an officer south, at minimum, a cruiser and an officer. Usually there'd be more than one, south of Veterans Bridge, so that there wouldn't ever have to be a concern that the police department might get cut off on the north side of town by some problem that might occur at the bridge. So these things have been considered. The response time and the response data from where the calls get responded to from has all been analyzed very thoroughly. And walk-in traffic as well. On walk-in traffic, we do know that there are certain individuals that would still need to walk into the police department, would need to either take the bus up to the new location or get a ride from someone to the new location. It wouldn't be as convenient for a walker, but what we found when we carefully analyzed that is that less than 10% of the people who come and visit the police department at the municipal center are actually walking in to see them. Most people are either driving to the municipal center, some are riding a bike, but very few are actually walking into the municipal center today. And so while there is a downside, there's a balancing act to any major decision like this, there is a downside for those who would prefer the convenience of being able to walk to the police department. The police department will, of course, respond to anyone who needs assistance or needs to meet with a police officer anywhere in town. So, we can come out and meet that need. And we don't believe that downside outweighs the upside of $1 million capital savings and the operational benefits of being on Black Mountain Road. As to the fire stations, the cost savings there is not as significant of a reduction, but it's not insignificant. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars. It does involve the elimination of a whole floor of the addition to the building and some reworking of the space inside the central fire station. And so that's actually yielded some improvements to the layout of the building as we've worked through the different options and tried to find the most cost-effective way to meet the needs of the department. So, for instance, the administrative offices have gone from the second floor in the plans of 2 years ago down to the first floor, and would make the leadership of the department more accessible to the public. There are other ways in which the plans are not as don't do everything that the original plans would have done. One of the things that had to be sacrificed was the creation of a separate dedicated emergency operations center. Fortunately, we don't have disasters of a magnitude very often that require us to activate an emergency operations center and convene the town staff there to lead a town-wide response. And we have other ways in which we can meet that need of the community on the very rare occasions when it arises. So we determined, as part of trying to make sure that we were getting the most bang for the buck out of these projects, that was something that had to be sacrificed. And there was some training room also that would have been more ample in the additional floor that was planned for the addition at the fire station, and that's been sacrificed. But these are things that are not part of the core daily functions of the department that we felt could be sacrificed in order to make sure that we brought the most cost-effective alternative forward for you to act upon. And so we're happy to recommend that to you. One concern that I've heard raised, and I'm sure we'll be talking about tonight, related to the Black Mountain Road location for the police department is whether we've fully enough analyzed the additional costs, the life cycle costs of having another building in the town's infrastructure and having to maintain another roof and another boiler and another property, and also some concerns about travel distance and travel times. We have analyzed the costs of operating and maintaining the building and ultimately replacing the major systems of the building. And as you'll see in the material that's in your briefing book, we have determined that that's about a wash. It requires some assumptions, so we could have been more aggressive in those assumptions and said, oh, we're going to save money by doing this, and we could have been more conservative in those assumptions and said, well, there might be a little bit of extra cost, but only a little. What I can tell you is that making reasonable, prudent assumptions, we have determined that it's about $60,000 a year of cost for maintaining and operating the additional facility, and that equates roughly to the amount of debt service savings that the $1 million of capital provides. So the cost of paying off the debt for the building would be reduced by about $60,000 a year by choosing the Black Mountain Road alternative versus the municipal center. The cost of operating that additional facility would also be about $60,000 a year. There's roughly a wash there. The taxes that the reformer's parent company has been paying to the town as owners of that property have been about $20,000 a year. That'll go off the tax rolls if the town is the owner of the building, but we will be receiving rent from the reformer as an occupant within a smaller space within the building after we've renovated it. And that rent is going to be actually in excess of $20,000 a year, but we believe net, once you account for the expenses of carrying a tenant within the building, will be about $20,000. So that also washes. And what we're left with in the life cycle analysis is that there will be space that will be vacated at the municipal center by the police department that would be available to lease and make some amount of revenue from. We're not going to tell you that it's going to be Class A office space and that it's going to yield, tremendous amounts that'll take great pressure off of the property tax. It is not a revenue solution, and we're not suggesting that it is in the broader scheme of town government. What it does do, though, because we know already of a couple of different entities that have shown some interest in possibly renting space there, who have low expectations for it becoming fancy, recognize that it's an old building, it's a public building, and would be occupied in with a coat of paint and some carpet, probably much in the same condition as it is today, that it is a real potential for the town to raise thousands of dollars, perhaps tens of thousands of dollars each year as rental income from the space on the first floor. The bulk of the first floor is occupied currently by the police department. So we think that's been fully enough analyzed, and to the degree that there are people in the room who have concerns that it hasn't been, we would welcome some dialogue around that part of this evening. I think that's complete for the moment.
So I have just a number of things I wanted to conclude with. First, I left out John O'Connor, and I want to thank John as well for all of his work on the financing piece. I didn't list him in the first round of people, and so I want to recognize you as well for all your work on this. Thank you. The second thing I would note is that getting to what's presented here tonight really involved a different process from how we got to what was presented 4 years ago. What was presented 4 years ago came from recommendations that were made by a consultant, which said, do it in one place, and presented one set of plans for that, and then there was cost cutting from that. What your select board has done and your town government has done over the course of the last 8 or 10 months is look broadly at the alternatives that are available, lower cost alternatives, alternatives that would not provide generational updates to these buildings and take us forward 10 or 20 years. And then also look at other locations and other ways to do the work. And so we were presented with a series of alternatives, and Select Board needed to decide how to proceed. Were we going to present a smorgasbord of alternatives to town meeting and ask people to pick from a range of them? But we really concluded ultimately that that wasn't workable. And there actually were many people who came to our select board meetings and recommended that we settle in on a specific alternative to present. And I think ultimately the board was heading that way as well, because for most members of the board, there was one particular alternative that rose to the top, being the one that's been endorsed. Then, in terms of the question for decision on March 12th, we have approved a warning that will be asking whether an amount not to exceed $4,500,000 of the proceeds of the bonds authorized in October 2012 be expended for the purposes of purchasing land and buildings at 62 Black Mountain Road and renovating the lands and buildings into a police station instead of doing the police renovations at the municipal center as authorized at the October 2012 representative town meeting. That question is presented in that manner based upon the advice of the bond counsel for the town. So town meeting has to authorize the issuance of bonds. And in October 2012, the question presented to the town meeting was authorization of bonds in the amount of $14.1 million for the purposes of doing this police fire renovation work at the current locations of those facilities. And what bond counsel advised is that if our choice, our recommendation was to go forward with the fire station work at the current stations, but instead to move the police station up to Putney Road, then all we should be seeking authority from town meeting was this limited question: should we take this portion of the money and spend it to buy and renovate the reformer building instead of doing the work downtown at the municipal center? So that's the question that's presented. Very hard to predict just what's going to happen on March 12th. And after March 12th, Select Board will be meeting promptly. I think our meeting thereafter is the following Tuesday. So what's it, the 15th of March? And depending on what the vote is, if the vote is to proceed at Black Mountain Road, and it's not like 50-50, because 50-50 might be problematic. I don't know what board would do. But if it's a healthy majority to move up to Black Mountain Road, I expect that the budget that would be presented at the March 19th representative town meeting would be what's included in those orange books if you've picked them up yet or if they've been mailed to you, plus the additional money to start the borrowing for the how much more?
7.7.
For the $7.7 million in additional borrowing. And so there would be more of a tax increase that would be, we would be asking town meeting to authorize on March 19th in order to begin the work just as soon as we can. We do have a healthy surplus, and we've made a decision to spend that to help defray taxes this year, and we've decided to keep some of that back in order to reduce some of the tax impact next year in contemplation of moving forward with this police firework as well. But that's the reason that the question is authorized as it is. Before opening the floor up to questions or comments, I just want to give my fellow board members the courtesy, if they want to speak at this point, noting that Mr. Scholes is still at a school board meeting, if they've got anything that they want to offer right now. Anybody? Well, all righty then. So we're available for any questions or comments you may have. Mr. Agave.
Does this come loose? Like that? Does it still work? Okay. I would like, since I'm addressing everybody, I would like to actually stand over here so everybody could see me and I can see all of you. Mr. Gartenstein is absolutely right. What this is mostly about is the police station. I think most people have come to agree that the fire station is a necessity. And it's not about, I think we all agree that, I assume, that the safety and welfare of all town employees, particularly the police, is necessary. There is no doubt, that's universal. And there's no real, it's hard, we're not experts enough to really know whether they can or they can't provide the same quality policing from Black Mountain Road or not. That would take a person that would really have to understand the intricacies of police work. And I can't say. So let's just say, for argument's sake, that's not an issue either. The police chief says they can, and I can accept that. The issue is what we're going to spend for what we get. And that is, we've heard a lot. I've been through the presentations now for 12 years, I don't know, 12, 14 years, maybe 30 or 40 years, I don't know, long time. And as an aside, my own feeling is it was because the decision was made at the very beginning that everything would be done at once and it was going to be all or nothing that caused the whole thing to bog down for all of these years. But that's the way, that was the tradition in the town. That was long before the recession, when the future looked very different, when money was a little bit more abundant, when town tradition was to do things just like that. You know, we need new steps, so we might as well rebuild the whole porch and throw in a walkway and a driveway while we're at it. That's the way it was always done, and we seem to be able to afford it. Unfortunately, at that time, we had the high school and a lot of other expenses, and we have a lot of expenses in the future. So one of the other little problems with this is that we are going to raise our debt level in town quite a bit, which means when we have to borrow more money, we're likely to be paying more interest on that money. So that's an expense that's not in there. Another expense that's not in there is the location costs, which I have a post, many of you have seen it, it's on the IBRAT website, which actually breaks down what it cost to run, since most of the population lives in the center, south, and west. When you put the station up north, nearly all the trips are, well, it's 2 miles up and 2 miles back. And when you take the cost of that trip, actually a police officer costs us about $75,000 a year with benefits or more. So you got about $6 and something in labor just to make the trip, and then the cost of the car and the gas, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. You multiply that times all the trips that are made every day by every town vehicle, whether it's the police chief taking home a car or going to a meeting, and all the officers coming and going. And I figure over 20 years, we add close to $3 million onto location cost. So actually, all said and done, when you take the $4.5 million and you take the equivalent amount of interest on that, which is I don't know what that would be, probably about 2 million or 1.6 or 7 million of the interest would be on that portion of it. And then you add in the location costs, et cetera, you're actually up to about an $8 million expense. For what? Well, the steps going into the basement are not appropriate and not safe to be trying to get a prisoner down, which happens once or twice every week. And how many actual incidents when a prisoner might get out of hand on the steps, I don't know. Is that a project? And then we have records, there's mold and stuff in the basement. Does the solution to this problem require $8 million? Well, all right, I will wrap it up then. It's hard because there's actually no other way the board and the administration gets all the time they need to make a presentation, and it's very hard for any one of us to address all of us at any other time. We don't have the mailings, we don't have the website or anything like that. But I understand, I agree, and I will wrap this up. So the other thing was, and I'll make this the final point, crime in this town is to my knowledge, no higher or lower than it has been. It's been very normal. We have waves of things come in. We had a wave of hard drugs. But these things are not going to change because the police station is up on Black Mountain Road. So we have a fairly safe town. We have a professional police force. We get good service from them. Moving the station up there is not going to change any of that. So I ask everybody to think about what does $8 million really do for us?
Procedurally, what I opened up the floor to was both questions and comments. And I didn't set a specific time limit because I started by saying that we would stay here as long as necessary to hear what everybody had to say. If it's the sense of the group that it'd be better to limit comments to a shorter period of time, I'm certainly prepared to be the timekeeper and to set limits to comments. I am going to ask the town manager to speak to some of those cost-related issues that were just raised.
I'm not going to speak to the part of the comments that related to the level of need for the project. I'm going to let that be where it is. We've had a lot of communication in the community around that for years now, actually, and there's a lot of information in the book about that. So I don't think we need to belabor that. I do want to speak specifically to the calculation, the estimate of what transportation costs would be, because I see it differently. First, just a factual matter, the chief doesn't have a take-home car. The chief drives his own car from home to work and from work to home. And likewise, as we don't pay to provide a vehicle for him, I don't see any aspect of this, and we've analyzed it thoroughly, that would lead to any additional vehicles or any additional people, or for that matter, any additional expense related to the people we already have. That's just not going to happen for the reason that we've already talked about, related to the reassurance about our ability to protect the community from a North End police headquarters. The police officers are out in the community all the time throughout their shifts. They're putting miles on the cars that far exceeds the trip back and forth between downtown to Black Mountain Road, just by being out doing their jobs in the community. And so there might or might not be a marginal increase in the usage of the vehicles. the only impact of that, if there is a marginal increase, it wouldn't be a material increase under any circumstance. If there's a marginal increase in it, we'll have some additional fuel costs that would be, again, not a material increase in the police department's budget. So for that matter, we don't see the transportation side of this as being something that should be of concern in the balancing of the pros and cons in the decision that you're going to be making.
To the extent that people are making comments, I will ask you please to limit your comments to 2.5 or 3 minutes. And then if we need more time after people have had a chance to speak, we can come back to you. I saw Mr. Whitlock.
Marshall Wheelock, District 3. One of the bonuses, as I understood it in the original project, was the fact that many of the physical problems that the town hall enjoys at this point in time were going to be remedied as part of this overhaul of the police department down there. What has happened to that portion of the package, and what are the estimated costs to make those improvements separately and not a part of this whole project?
The life safety portion of those is being addressed now, actually. We've begun to address it because we actually had fire code violations in the building that had to be corrected and couldn't wait for the longer term improvements. So we have installed a new fire alarm system this past fiscal year. In the coming fiscal year, we will be installing a new fire sprinkler system throughout the building, and then there will be, in the third phase, based on a plan that we've proposed to phase this out so that we could afford it, frankly. It's about $500,000 worth of work in total. And the third phase that has a couple $100,000 cost to it is some construction activity within the building to do things like put fire-rated doors at the top and bottom of the stairwells and other related improvements to the building. So the very basic needs for fire safety will be addressed. The layout of the building, much of the cost related to the municipal center alternative for the police department is related to the addition and the modifications in the interior of the building to change its layout. So the layout of the building isn't expected to change if the police department moves. We would expect to reuse the spaces that exist there in their current configuration for the tenants that we might attract to the building. The one remaining issue that would need to be addressed is the condition of the basement. We would be basically evacuating the basement if the police department went north and we leased the upper area, the first floor and space that's occupied by the police department. So it wouldn't be as an immediate of a need, but there would be an unaddressed portion of what would otherwise be included in this project, which would be the mold and the other dangerous conditions that exist down in the basement area of the building.
Tell us your name. Yeah, please.
Hi, Emily Megas Russell, District 1. I'd like to hear from Chief Fitzgerald about his personal or professional thoughts on which plan you prefer, and then also what you're hearing from the folks that work in the police department and why. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We've looked at those plans, both Black Mountain Road and Option A that we have briefed on. Both plans satisfy a majority of our needs. Black Mountain Road will satisfy all our needs. And what we're talking about are major needs. If you look on page 64 of your handouts, is some of the needs that we addressed as critical needs. Municipal Center meets 4 out of the 6 needs. The 2 that they won't meet, and they meet at some level but not fully, is the secure and dry area for long-term storage of records and evidence. Currently, right now, we have major incident response vehicles that are stored down at 142 in a lot. We have evidence vehicles that are stored up at DPW
and we also have other like six-wheelers and back roads vehicles that are stored at Brat Fire. And to put that in perspective, it would be like having a rescue vehicle, you know, on Cotton Mill Hill with their response net, with their headquarters right next to Price Chopper. So that is a huge issue of ours. We have gear spread out all over town. Not to mention inside the municipal center, the issues that we have storing our short-term and long-term records, which quite frankly, some by statute, we have to keep for 50 years, some for indefinitely. So we're tied by statute. This is not an option. We have to maintain those records and evidence. Another area that is absolutely critical to the police department is the workflow. And staying at the municipal center, we would be on 3 different levels. So theoretically, you would have supervisors on one floor supervising people on a different floor. And the workflow. So anybody that owns a business, you got to have your supervisors with your workers, and the Sally Port, when we bring individuals for processing, it just has to have a workflow. Patrol officers work hand in hand with detectives, which work hand in hand with our evidence managers, which work hand in hand with our clerks that finalize all the paperwork that goes over to the prosecutor's office. So to have these on different levels certainly would add to the time and decrease our efficiency. By moving to Black Mountain Road, we hit 6 out of those 6 major needs. I can go out and collect all the gear that is scattered throughout town, and I can bring them up and put everything I own in one collective area. Our workflow, we are all on the same floor. Currently, the way it is set up, it's like a canvas. So we pretty much can go in there and we're not restricted by hallways, brick walls, things of that nature. So it's an open canvas for us, and we can sit down with the project manager and the architect and basically come up with a absolutely perfect work efficiency flow in that building. So the officers are excited about that. Obviously, I'm very excited about that. And what I think everybody should be excited about, it comes at a cost of $1 million cheaper than if we stayed at the municipal center. So to answer your question, the officers and myself, just because it meets all the major needs, most certainly are in favor of Black Mountain Road over the municipal center. But I'd like to add, the municipal center will meet some of those needs.
I have more of a comment, and it is for the reps. My name is Daniel Kasnitz, District 1, and to me the question is, as long as we're focused on the priority of having a good police department, which I think we almost all will agree is a really good idea, and we have professionals that clearly stated the building is preferable, and there may even be a cost savings, unless there's some police professional that would have some notion against that, I just don't see that there is any doubt as to whether or not to vote yes, that a yes vote is merited on this.
Just a question and a comment. So, Cassandra Holloway, District 3. Woo. Thank you. New, obviously. So I wanted to ask a question about parking, because if the municipal building takes up that back space, I'm just curious where all the police cars would be, vehicles would be parked. Because obviously people need the other part of the parking lot for the state office. And comment is just about people being able to access somewhere safe in downtown, just if that could be considered, maybe even the fire department, because obviously we want people to be able to walk somewhere and not feel like they can't get there. So just a comment and a question.
parking at the municipal center, if the police station were to expand, would be a challenge.
He's absolutely correct.
We'll do it if we have to, but,
Yeah.
yeah. Yes, sir. Did I answer all the questions you had? Oh, in terms of, I'm sorry, let me just finish. In terms of having another location downtown, we have considered the possibility of having some sort of an outpost downtown, for lack of a better word, maybe at the parking garage, maybe at the fire station, maybe at the municipal center. We've been cautious about really representing that that's going to be a fully staffed place where an officer's going to be spending time, because that's not what's contemplated. It is possible that there would be a space, fire station or at the parking garage. I mean, the ticketing agency is down there. Anyway, I guess it's parking enforcement. I'm sorry, I called it ticketing. But it's being contemplated, but there's no particular specific plan right now for a downtown outpost. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that is fair to say. And the reason we've been cautious about it is to not oversell, frankly, and have people say, oh, well, as long as there's going to be one downtown, then we're fine. We're concerned about if there are people who may not support the recommended plan because the police department headquarters would be moved out of downtown, we don't want to reassure you with the promise of a downtown substation in the same manner that we feel we can, with credibility, reassure you about the ability of the police department to adequately protect all of us throughout the community. So we say the one unequivocally because we've analyzed it and we believe it, and the police professionals know how they would keep that promise. The other, we know we couldn't staff it full-time, and to have it be there but not be fully staffed begs the question of, what kind of presence do you maintain there, and how do you have that meet the needs of that subsection of our community that would prefer to walk in? We don't have an answer to that at this point.
Go ahead, Joe.
I just want to ask the chief if he could expound a little bit on one of the reasons that you like this idea is that you still, out of all the professions still out there, you still make house calls. So can you just reassure the people that, that's still going to be in effect?
That is correct. That is correct. We did do a response data, and 2/3 of our responses were from officers that were out in their cruisers within the community. And what we have in place down at the station now is some of our tactics that maybe will help people understand a little bit on how we actually deploy our officers. We have minimum of 3 officers per shift. Sometimes we have more, but you're always going to have at least 3. And what we ask of them is they spend an hour downtown per shift per officer. So first shift, second shift, third shift, at a minimum, you're going to have 3 officers. And at some time during that 10-hour period, they're going to be out of their cruisers. And it's either going to be downtown or in other areas of the town that for some reason or another require our attention. So they're going to get out, and that serves many, many purposes. Number one, I'm a big advocate that the officers are a part of the community, and to be a part of the community, you don't need to be driving by at 25, 30 miles an hour and just waving at people. You need to get out there, you need to talk, you need to go in there, introduce yourself to the merchants, talk to the merchants, be down there at 5, 6 o'clock in the evening when the businesses are being closed, when CVC is being let out. things of that nature, so people can see you, okay? That's very important. So that's part of what we're doing. Also, to go on what Mr. Allen was saying, you know, if you don't have to come to the police department to deal with a police officer. We make house calls. Pick up the phone, give us a call. We can come out and see you and discuss whatever you want to talk about. You necessarily don't have to walk to the police station. We also are in the process of putting in mobile data terminals in all our cruiser. Basically, those are laptops. And with that, what we're trying to accomplish is to keep officers out of the station as much as possible. We want to really keep that to a minimum. Obviously, they're going to do roll call, they're going to eat their meals, and they're going to process individuals all at the station. But other than that, you know, they should be out there, and they can do, they're pretty much 80-90% of their paperwork from their cruisers while they're not driving around, obviously, but, you know, while they're parked, or, you know, just sitting in a neighborhood and things of that nature. So there's really a lot that we're doing, and our ultimate goal is to make sure that every cruiser eventually has an MDT. And we're aggressively searching all sorts of funding, both federally and state, to make sure our cruisers have MDTs. So there's a lot that we're doing, nothing but positive results from the supervisors and officers and everything that we are introducing to them. And they really want to get out there and be a part of the community. So basically, that's I hope I answered your question in a very long-winded way.
Sorry.
No problem right now. My back would rather be standing up than sitting down anyway. George Carville, District 1. 3 questions. One on page 31, where it happens to be the number for the total cost for the police, say $4 million and change. I'd like to know how much of that is for the purchase of the property. If it's someplace else in here, I'm sorry, I just got that. So that's question 1. Question 2, assuming the police move out of the municipal center, what's it going to cost to make the empty space suitable to rent? And the third question, maybe it's a softball question, but I'm a little worried about a slippery slope. The police move out this year. There's still problems with the building. Maybe the town clerk has to go someplace next year. Then the treasurer the year after that needs a new home, and then it's the town manager. What assurance do we have that the municipal center will still stay the municipal center?
The answer to the first question is very clear. It's $740,000 is the purchase price. We have an option to purchase at that cost. So if this is approved by town meeting, we'll proceed towards that as one of the implementation steps early on, acquire the property and do the final design and get on with the project. Yes, and the entire purchase and sale option agreement is on page 80. Begins on page 80 of the briefing book if you want to look at the details that are in there. That also includes, there's an exhibit attached to that that has the details related to the lease that is contemplated with the reformer. As to the future of the municipal building, we can definitely say that there is not a plan to one by one move departments off to other places. But we can't unequivocally say that the building will continue to be occupied forever as it is occupied now and has been for decades as the seat of our government. There are different opinions, even up here at this table, and certainly throughout the community about on the one hand, iconic historic character of the building versus on the other hand, the financial burden that it represents to the community in its current condition. And there's a healthy conversation that we would need to have around that going forward. That's a separate issue for a separate time. What I can say about the short-term implication of this decision is that there would not be significant renovation expense to the town to make the police department space ready to be occupied by a tenant. The kinds of tenants, and I didn't mean to be facetious, even though I guess I was a little bit, about the Class A office space. We really don't mean to be going out and competing in the commercial office space sector of the town. What we envision is either another public sector entity or nonprofits, perhaps several smaller nonprofits that might occupy the space. Folks that would be happy to come into the space more or less as it exists today with, as I said, probably a coat of paint and maybe some new carpet, something like that. But nothing that would be a significant expense or a grand improvement.
Peter?
Peter Fallion, District 3. As a follow-up to that, what planning or expenses are anticipated for improving the energy efficiency of this building?
Talking Black Mountain Road?
No, the municipal center.
Municipal Center?
I mean, presumably if you rent it out, and even if you don't rent it out, there are still town offices in there. When I was a member of the Energy Committee, Efficiency Vermont gave an audit on that building, and that's probably part of the record that you've reviewed.
Right.
It needs a tremendous amount of work to create the thermal envelope that was suggested by that report. So is that part of the planning now, or would it be in the future, is my question.
So energy efficiency improvements are, we've had recently a number of audits done of town facilities, and we recognize the payback value of doing that. So it's not just good for the planet, it can be also good for the town's taxpayers' financial burden. Specifically, again, it's hard for me to speculate about what we would do or wouldn't do and on what schedule at the municipal center if you approve the relocation of the police department to Black Mountain Road, because there's a very healthy conversation that needs to be had around that as a next step. What would we invest there, not only in energy efficiency, but otherwise going forward?
Stevens?
Bob Stevens, District 2. I do have concerns about the total cost of the project, and thank you for a lot of additional work and work in general that's gone into this. So maybe just a couple of questions right now. One, I see in the analysis for operational costs, there's a discussion about a reserve for future capital needs of $5,000 a year. Was there a capital needs study done of the reformer building to determine, again, what is the current remaining life in the roof and the pavements and the boilers and so on? And you're buying a building that's several years old, and if you're not replacing all these things now, then some of them are going to wear out, and $5,000 a year may not be enough, I guess, would be my concern. And I would like to sort of reiterate on our guests, maybe ask you to speak a little more philosophically about this issue. I am concerned about the town competing with the private sector and renting office space. There's a tremendous amount of office space available in this town. The town, as you said a minute ago, you're not looking to put Class A office space out. You're also not paying taxes, and you're not paying debt service for capital improvements, which everybody else in the community needs to pay to rent space. So philosophically, again, getting into the real estate business is not a municipal function the way I see it. And I'm concerned, I think you're going to have close to 20,000 square feet of space that's not used by the municipality when you're done. I mean, I sort of looked at some numbers from both the reformer building isn't fully used, and the town hall has some space currently rented. So that's the slippery slope that I'm concerned about, and again, just like to hear your thoughts on it.
Sure.
So, those two things.
The space is less than 20,000 square feet, but there is space at both locations. You heard the chief speak about the fact that the flexibility that offers in terms of a place to store evidence and sort of the accessory pieces of equipment, the things that aren't used every day but are needed at times when they're really needed for the police department and responding to certain types of situations. There's room to store that at the Black Mountain Road location and not room to store it all in one place downtown. So yes, there is some space up there that would not be part of the renovation in the municipal center, the police station proper, or the 2,000 to 3,000 square feet that would be allocated to the reformer continuing to have a presence there. As far as the competition question and the office space, again, I think that the types of organizations that we would expect to have an interest in being tenants at the municipal center are people who are not going to be, we wouldn't be taking business away from the private office buildings that are catering to commercial offices in the community. We would expect folks who need a lower end space and can pay a lower end rent. So I'm not concerned about that. Frankly, we don't want to be landlords. That's not something we aspired to. But because we believe that the best alternative available to us to address this literally 30-year-old need in the community is to acquire the Black Mountain Road property and move the police department to there, we feel like the challenge that presents in terms of making good use of the vacated space at the municipal center is a challenge we can meet. It was not an objective of the project. It's something that would just happen as part of implementing what we think is the smartest way to proceed to provide the right public safety facilities at this time for the community.
Capital needs assessment at the reformer building?
Capital needs assessment at the reformer building, yes. The major systems of the building would be upgraded as part of the renovation, and the $5,000 a year we think is adequate. There's actually a specific breakdown I can offer to, if you'd be interested in hearing that, or we can get together separately around it, of how that was calculated as to why we think 5,000 is accurate, or is sufficient for having an allocation related to the roof, to the boiler, and to the plumbing and to the electrical system of the building.
Mr. Chapman?
Thank you. I'm Chris Chapman, District 1. I have a question about foot policing, but before I ask it, I wanted to compliment the board on taking this, what appears to have been an exceptionally difficult matter to solve with respect to spending appropriately on much-needed police and fire facilities. This is one of the hardest ones I know of in my experience in living in this town, and I think the Select Board has been admirable in the efforts it's gone to make this issue work. And the question I have returns us to the matter of foot policing. Chief, what changes are likely to be made to foot policing by virtue of this? I heard you talking about what you do now, what the plan is. Is there any change? I just didn't quite catch whether there was a change in the works. And if you could also comment about the importance of foot policing as opposed to patrol car policing. Is the location of the police of the police facility going to affect that at all? Thank you.
Absolutely not. It will not affect it one bit. Our officers will be out on patrol, and they're still going to be required to get out and walk downtown and other various areas of town that require our attention. That's just an operational way we employ our officers, and that will continue. What will change, and the town manager spoke on it briefly, is if we move to Black Mountain Road, is something that we currently don't do, and that is we will put part of our tactics to, with our supervisors is that 24/7 there will always be a cruiser south of Veterans Bridge. Currently we don't operate like that. simply because we're all over the place. But I understand that it is a concern of a lot of citizens that we won't be south of the bridge, and then if something ever happened with that bridge, that we'd all be caught up north. The interstate should be done here in a year or two, we hope, so that will help us out. As of, in reference to your question concerning my philosophy on policing is we need, you can't police inside a cruiser, okay? A very small part of what we do on a daily basis is considered criminal in nature. A large majority of what we do is considered quality of life or livability issues, where we are interacting with every one of our citizens on totally different levels. And for officers to understand what's going on in the community, they have to get out and immerse themselves within the communities. We have to know what time businesses close. We have to know who's coming and going. We have to know who's hanging out where and talking to them and notice things that are different. Part of what we do is, and if we do it well, we're quite a success, is to prevent crime. Not react, let's be a little bit proactive, not reactive. Let's get down there, let's look around, let's be in the transportation center. Let's be at the different playgrounds. Let's be at the schools when students are being dropped off, when parents are picking them up. Let's be at school functions late at night, the sporting events. Make ourselves known in the Boys and Girls Club. Go in there, talk to them. I absolutely believe that there's very few people that have positive interactions with police, and I'm determined to change that. The only time they have any type of interaction with the police is when lights are in the rearview mirror and they're asking for your license, registration, or insurance, or that you are at some very low point in your life where we have to respond. And that shouldn't be the case. So Captain Kerrigan and myself and the supervisors down at the police department are really determined and focused on getting our officers out into the community to be a part of the community and to really turn this around, that the only time you have an interaction with a police officer is usually negative. That's not going to be the case in the town of Brattleboro. We want to change that whole interaction, that whole philosophy between the citizens and their police department. Did I answer your question satisfactorily?
Yes, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Paula Melton, District 1. Spoon, I'm sorry for interrupting you. I just worry about what feels like town meeting debate happening when it's not town meeting. That's all. It wasn't personal. So I have two questions. The first is about the timeline of the two main projects that are under discussion. When would the renovation and addition downtown start versus when the renovation at the Reformer building would start, and what would be the move-in date of each one? And my second question is about continued use of the basement if we were to stay in the municipal center, and whether that's been tested for radon. Thanks.
I don't know the answer about radon, so that's something we'd have to look into. But we do, the plan is if we were to go with the municipal center alternative at this point, the plans from what you all had seen 2 years ago have been modified now to clean up and fix up and occupy the basement area. So a large part of what makes the municipal center option more affordable now than what it was in the 2013 scenario is the fact that the addition is smaller and we'll be utilizing that basement space. So that's we think viable. That is the plan. It would require some substantial additional design there before, the design would be very significantly altered from what was prepared back in 2013. So I don't have an exact timeline to offer you, but the time frame would be roughly the same at either location. The option to purchase the reformer building is in place for us to be able to move forward, as soon as we have authority to do that. And so we can acquire the building, and then we can have the final design of that building, completed in roughly the same time frame. There'd be a little bit more work. We'd be starting from scratch, but also with a much more flexible situation to design the work for Black Mountain Road as compared to the rework of the design at the Municipal Center. So I don't think they'd be materially different. It's going to take months in either case before we would have final design and be ready to move forward into construction. Based on the amount of time it's taken to get to this point and get the decision made, this would be a very high priority to finalize the plans and move forward with the work. So it's something that we would have a better handle on the actual schedule. I could give a more detailed answer once we are into the final design and can project when that'll be completed and proceed with the actual construction. One thing that I think is important, regardless of the location decision, is that we do make a decision as a community and move forward now. That's not just because we've been spending decades trying to find the right solution, and it's not just because the construction cost will continue to increase. The 2013 plan is currently estimated to cost about $1 million more than it was estimated to cost back in 2013, because things get more expensive when we wait. So we should expect that if we don't make a decision around this and get moving now, that it will cost more to do the work in the future. But what worries me more, frankly, is the cost of the borrowing. We are at the tail end of a record low period of interest rates. We're borrowing a significant amount of money to do a major improvement for our community. And the moment is coming any day now where those rates are going to start to go back up and be back up at more normal rates, and who knows what the future will bring. But they're not going to be this low again going forward. And this is the moment when we can capture the tail end of the bottom of the interest rates and lock that in for either a 20 or a 30-year period for payback. That, I think, is the most compelling urgency of this that makes it time for us to make a decision as a community and move forward.
I will very briefly note, however, that the board has not yet made a decision about how to proceed if the Putney Road alternative is not endorsed. And so while they could take the same amount of time, assuming a decision, we haven't made a decision as to what to do if Black Mountain Road doesn't happen. So some of what Peter just spoke to in terms of timing is speculative because, the board has to make a decision. Emily?
I'm Emily Kornheiser. I live on Goodenough Road. I trust the police department to know what's best for them, and I've had some very positive experiences with you in the past, letting me into my locked car without making fun of me, a few other lovely experiences. So I have some, but I think there will be some negative effects to leaving downtown. I just want to make sure we're planning and mitigating for those effects. So I have 3 questions related to that. One is about the planning implications of putting sort of more of our infrastructure and energy into the Putney Road sprawl area, and if we have any ideas towards that. The second one is, even though you only have a few walkers coming in for police services, my assumption is that that's some of our most vulnerable citizens, and how we might expect those people to be able to access services. They might not have safe homes to be calling from. And the last one is, I've often enjoyed access to the municipal building late at night for meetings. I wonder how security and hours and darkness will work for that. Thank you.
As for the walkers that, right now, we have thought quite extensively on how we're going to deal with that. We had, on our survey, we had 10 people, at a 33%, 10 of them walked to the municipal center. And we are going to look at to see if we can get that on the bus route, up on Black Mountain Road, if that can be a bus stop for up on there. And I can't emphasize enough that if you need us, we can come to you, okay? It's really not a necessity for you to come to the police department. If you need to see a police officer, call us and we will respond to your, either wherever you're at. You don't even have to be home. If you have a cell phone and you're in the middle of a parking lot, that's where we'll go to. If you're at a friend's house, that's where we'll go to. There's really not an essential need for people to go to the police department by any reason, walking, biking, driving, unless they particularly want to just come to the police department for whatever reason.
There is one particular circumstance that leads to a greater number of walk-ins, and I'm going to stick my neck out and offer this and ask the chief to correct or clarify if he feels that a correction or clarification is needed. But we currently provide a service, and we have been providing for a long time, a service at the municipal center through the police department that's really a part of the court system, which is for people who are in the correctional process to be able to check in and show that they're still in town and complying with their requirements of their circumstances. And so we know that a good portion of the people who walk into the municipal center walk in for that purpose. That's frankly a service, while wouldn't suggest that it's not an important part of the overall work of the criminal justice system and the law enforcement. It's not, strictly speaking, something the town needs to provide. It's something the town taxpayers have been subsidizing at very low cost because it's just been inconvenient for it to occur there. But the town's been taking on that responsibility, fulfilling that responsibility for a long time, when in fact it's not a town responsibility, it's a court responsibility. So I don't know that the court would necessarily just take it back, or whether we'd need to work together to identify, how that need can be met here in our community going forward. But many of the people who check in, for instance, are not people who had dealings with the Brattleboro Police Department and had committed a crime here in Brattleboro, but they're part of the regional system. And we feel like it's legitimate that that's something that needs to be addressed as part of this transition. We don't feel like it's a town obligation necessarily to continue providing that particular service.
Going over here first.
Wait, can
Yeah.
the planning implications of putting more energy into
I didn't hear.
Rod, you want to speak to that? Sure. I'm going to ask the planning director to speak to that one. We just adopted a new town plan this year.
Last year.
Last year. New zoning ordinance this year.
Hi, Emily. It's a good question. In rough terms, the existing town plan calls for the area basically east of I-91 to receive more intense development and to preserve the rural landscape that's roughly to the west, taking into account Route 9 and the development along the Route 9 corridor. So in rough terms, the new land use regulations that are consistent with the town plan call for a rejuvenation of the Putney Road area and an enhancement, hopefully coming from VTrans for the road itself, which would significantly improve bike and pedestrian safety and usability for that stretch of road. Ultimately, over time, we would expect a transition towards a more mixed-use setting, but that would have to be market-led. So in very short terms, it's within the area that we hope and expect to develop more intensely, and we wouldn't view it as a factor in increasing sprawl. So, yeah, I hope that helps.
Thank you. I'm asked to note that the Saturday, March 12 meeting decision is going to be made by Australian ballot, but we need a quorum at that meeting in order to be able to transact business. So as I see people starting to leave this evening, I invite and encourage and exhort all of you please to come to town meeting on March 12th so that we can do our business there, all the way in the back. Please tell us your name. Oh, yeah, I'm doing what I can.
I'm David Manning, and I just want to comment on some things being said. I hear a lot from the police chief, call us and we'll come to you, but that's not true. That's not true. If you aren't getting responded to for a domestic or a property crime or being served papers, the police want you to go there. You want to fill out a report, the police want you to go there. You want to ask for some evidence, the police want you there. And last time this board met about this subject, I spoke about an incident with an officer. I didn't say his name, but his name is Officer Cable. And I tried to get a hold of this officer, not because I was in trouble, but I found someone vandalizing my business downtown. And with the officer's help, we had this young man arrested, and I was trying to get some police assistance to get a hold of this kid to get, to either get the judge to bring him before him, like to, clean up the mess or, some way fix the problem he had created. And I called Officer Cable 3 times over the course of 2 weeks, and he didn't call me back. I ran into Officer Cable downtown and, confronted him about it, and he told me he didn't feel he had to call me back. And I hear the police chief say, about this, like the culture of policing, but that's not what I'm experiencing. And while I've had some great experiences with the police as far as being police and being professional in Brattleboro, some of the best anywhere I've lived, but there's still way room for improvement. And it's not fair to say that you're going to provide transportation up there. Peter, I heard you talking earlier about, 10 out of 33 people didn't have a car, and currently I don't have a working car. The walk to the police department from my apartment is currently 5 minutes, and it would be an hour to do that otherwise. And I don't have a $5,000 car allowance, there's a lot of people in this town that don't have transportation needs met. And, you guys are pretty privileged. You have time to take out and sit on a board, well-paying jobs. You're doing okay. You're not thinking about the people that are not doing okay, that really need this to be a walkable community. They need to get to the police department. And, I love the municipal building. There's some people on the board that hate that building, but it's beautiful. It's a wonderful piece of architecture, and regardless of if it needs some work, we should keep it. And if you empty the police department out, you're going to destroy that building.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Hugh Barber. I'm a resident of District 3. I'm not currently a town meeting member. I hope I can speak as a taxpayer. Okay. I've sat in a lot of those chairs up there, so I have a lot of respect for everything you've all done to try to solve this difficult and needed improvements that our community needs. And I appreciate everything you've done. I know it's been an arduous process. The other thing I'd like to say is I don't really have a problem with the police department being on Black Mountain Road. I think they could do a wonderful job there. What I'm having a problem with is, what are you going to do with the municipal center? And it sounds like you're going to save $1 million by going up there, but you got all these improvements you got to make at the municipal center. So to me, you're not going to save $1 million. You're not going to save anywhere near it. And the reality of the municipal center now, it's not rentable, it's not marketable, it's worthless unless we put a lot of money into it. So it seems like you're trying to solve a problem by creating another problem. by moving the police station. I think we really need to fix it. So I don't like the idea of taking the reformer off the tax rolls, even though there's income is going to come in. And the Financial Times, a national syndicated publication, recently announced that in the past 6 years, print newspaper in the U.S. has shrunk 50%. I really wonder if the reformer is going to be around in 5 years to pay the rent. I mean, look at the banks; they've all changed except. And who's going to rent it then? I don't want the town to go down that road where they're creating problems that are going to exacerbate down the road. And like Mr. Stevens said, I don't think the town should be in the business of renting commercial real estate. They really ought to be in the business of governing the town. And another point I have is that there have been many local, state, and national endeavors to rebuild the downtown districts because it's been found that socially, economically, the vibrant downtown is good for the community. And I really hate to see the municipal center going downhill. The municipal center should be one of the hubs of downtown Brattleboro to keep Brattleboro what it is. Look what Brooks House did. Look what a lot of the property owners have done downtown. It's a vibrant economic region. I think you all ought to be there. And I can't imagine, you go down and stand on Walnut Street, look up at the municipal center. It's a majestic, beautiful building that served our community for 100 years. I can't imagine abandoning it and not fixing it up and moving on. And if it costs a little bit more than going out to Timbuktu, fine. But let's keep it the way, you know, all of you know I'm a very fiscally conservative guy, but I think the money spent at the municipal center and in the fire station and in West Brattleboro is prudent. Thank you.
Steve Phillips, District 3. I support this project after working closely with staff, administration, elected officials for 2 years on the Police Fire Committee. Done a lot of thinking about this, so I'll just say I support this project. What I'm concerned about, though, is last I knew, the board had not reached consensus on supporting this project, and I honestly can't remember who voted against it. Okay, so the question now is, has consensus now been reached, or is there still a lack of consensus? Because frankly, without consensus from the leadership, I think this project's dead. And I really think it's important that we do it.
If consensus has not been reached, I have not changed my position since I voted against it, but I don't think I don't agree with you that the project can't move forward because of the vote on the select board. I think it's sort of moved beyond our purview now, and it really is with the town meeting reps. So I have my opinion, and I voted against it for some of the reasons that people have expressed here this evening. But I would urge people not to vote in a way just because we have. I don't know if that makes sense, but I really think it's up to the town meeting reps now. It's moved from us to you.
Ted.
Tad Montgomery, District 2. 3 things. One, first a question for the police chief. In years past, we have had a bicycle patrol happening in Brattleboro. I haven't seen that recently, but I'm wondering if that would be precluded if the station were to move to the north end of town.
Why don't you give us all 3 questions?
Second, Peter, I'd like to have a discussion with you, maybe it's one-on-one. I still have some reservations about what I perceive of as additional life cycle costs in time and in fossil fuels with increased driving that would result from moving the station 2 miles north. So I'd like to, I don't think we need to belabor that here. Third question, looking through the packet, I haven't seen whether in the central fire station proposal, there is still the, if the construction is going to happen in such a way that it will allow the third floor to be built out in future years.
When the board made its decision, I'm going to answer the third question first. We ultimately voted not to include the additional cost for building out the third floor.
That wasn't my question.
That was the third question, right?
No. No, the building into the renovation, the ability to build the third floor.
We didn't include that additional bracing to support the third floor.
Okay.
And working backwards, to your second question, the fossil fuels from a overall consumption point of view in terms of the town's carbon footprint was not part of the life cycle analysis. The cost of the HVAC consumption, what it would cost in order to operate and maintain the building included, the cost of electricity, the cost of HVAC, the cost of the other components, landscaping maintenance, building maintenance, and so on. So, so the fossil fuel consumption in the operation of the building was valued in the life cycle analysis, but not the carbon footprint aspect of it.
As for the bike patrol, yes, we still have the bikes, and some good news and bad news on that, depending on who you are. All our bike officers, which we have to be certified, it's not we just give them a bike and let them go. You have to go through a week-long school, and it's just, it's pretty intense. But all our, I shouldn't say all, a majority of our bike officers have been promoted to supervisory level. So the decrease that you're seeing is two-part. Number one, our staffing level is down, and our bike officers have been promoted to supervisor, and supervisors cover all the sectors. So if there's an officer attending to an issue in the south, he's going to respond there and immediately lead there, go out west, go up north, go back to the station, do sign-offs. So he has to, or she has to be everywhere. And we're not going to do that on a bike. So good news is they got promoted out of that position. The bad news is we're understaffed right now, but we still have the bikes. We're still in favor of that program because, number one, the officers really like it, to get out and ride around on a nice, cool night downtown and get good exercise, get paid for it. So it's a good program. We like it. And you will see more of it in the future.
And that won't change with location?
Not one bit, absolutely not. Because how they do it right now is they put a bike rack on the back of the cruiser, and they will drive the cruiser with the bike down to like a Harmony lot. They'll park the cruiser, take the bike off, and do bike patrol. And if they have to go out west for whatever reason, or up north, they just put the bike back on the cruiser and go.
Deb Zach, District 2. I had a question about the lease at the Black Mountain facility. In the packet it says that it's for 3 years with the reformer, and to me that seems like a short time. I realize you've got some options there to renew for 3-year terms, but what's the point in having such a short lease if you're guaranteed an increase every year? So is it possible to negotiate that to a much longer term?
It is possible, but I certainly wouldn't want to have you make this decision based on expecting it to be longer. Those are tentative terms that were negotiated into that attachment to the option when we actually did negotiate to conclusion the option agreement. We agreed that at such time as it became relevant that we would work out the details of the lease. A perfectly valid point was made earlier this evening about the unfortunate condition of America's newspaper industry, and I can't speak for the reformer as far as their desire to maintain presence at that location versus elsewhere in the community, and what flexibility they want to maintain regarding a longer term or sticking to the 3 years. So it would be certainly a topic we could take up with them, but again, you know, we want to shoot straight about where we see the advantages and shoot equally straight where we see something that is a word of caution. And you're right to identify a 3-year term as being a short period of time.
Yeah, I guess when I think about the town of Brattleboro being a commercial landlord, your point about having really low end at the municipal center, you know, I understand that. I think there are going to be some nonprofits or, you know, people who just want an office space that's really low end at that location. But you really are a commercial landlord out at Black Mountain.
That's true.
And so to rent that, to have a vacancy at that space, you know, in talking with other brokers in town on commercial space, it's taking 10 months to a year to fill good space. So that's a lot of vacancy. And, you know, my comfort level, I would have a better comfort level with a much longer term lease up there, unless there's some plan for municipal expansion in that building, which...
We don't have such a plan to expand into that space. It is a small space, a small portion of the overall square footage in the building, but your point is valid about that being more true competition to the commercial office market.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Eric Schmidt, District 1. I have 2 quick comments and then 3 questions. I'll try to be quick with them. The comment is, I do have some concerns about moving to the reformer building based on accessibility, but I'm not decided yet whether that's a deal breaker. I am very concerned about the town becoming landlords in 2 buildings. And I also want to say that while I'm not in real estate as a business owner, though you may be competing in a very low cost segment of the market, that still is competition to other retail or other rental spaces. So I feel it's disingenuous to say that's not competition. And also, since the reformer has just had layoffs and the very astute observation on the nature of the newspaper industry, this is going to become an issue at some point. The questions I have is about the mold in the basement of the municipal center and how that is addressed in the plan to keep the PD in the municipal center, but it is not addressed in the plan to move the building, to move the PD to the Black Mountain building. I consider it incomplete as a proposal if we don't have a breakout cost, because maybe somebody here in the construction industry who knows more than me can point out, I'm not aware that mold fixes itself. So likely this is going to be something that needs to be fixed at some point anyway, especially if you're putting more rental space in there. So to say, we're not going to deal with this, you're hiding that cost and you're not giving us a true cost comparison in order to make an informed decision. So I could not put my vote in support of this project without having that information. And if it's somewhere in there, please point it out to me. The second question is, do we have any tenants on the hook or any firm reason to think that there are tenants who would rent the municipal center space, or is this wishful thinking, to put it rather harshly? And the third question is, of the almost $1 million we've spent so far on this project, I was wondering if you can break down, I couldn't find it anywhere in the book, how much of that was purchasing the land next to the fire station versus how much of that was plans, and what portion of that spending on plans was perhaps wasted by plans we're not using. Thank you.
How much did it cost to buy the...
I don't have an exact figure. I might be able to get it from Steve before we're done here tonight.
All right. You want to answer the mold question anyway in the basement?
That's actually what I was just looking for. What was the second question?
How much did it cost to buy the lot?
That was 300 and, yeah, I'm sorry. forgive me, I didn't hear the second question because we were actually looking for the mold answer, which I don't have. So I'm going to check with someone in the building who I think will have it.
Question. We all were listening. Even if the town manager
They passed it on. They have passed it on to me. And I'll find it here for you in just a second. It was 300 and some odd thousand, but I want to give you an exact number.
So for right now, there aren't tenants on the hook. There's been interest expressed by various people who've reached out and had very, very preliminary discussions that we can't talk about in public about the possibility that space might be open. Obviously, the reformer has committed, if we purchase the building, to stay in there 3 years as tenants at Black Mountain Road. So that's the tenant's question. As to the $900,000 that's been spent approximately, it was about $300,000. Patrick might know the exact number, or the town attorney might recall. It was about $300,000 to purchase the custom laundry property. And the rest of that expense, Steve might know the answer as well, but he's talking to the town manager, was for plans, for architectural drawings, and for some work by the construction manager. Most of that, as to the fire stations, can be used in part or in full. The plans as to municipal center would only be reusable if we are back there at municipal center. I hope that answered those two questions. And they're still checking on the mold question, and we'll get back to your answer, but we'll go on to somebody else for right now. Andy?
Andy Davis, District 3. Chief Bucossi, you've addressed the issue of, responding to calls, but I want to just ask another question about moving the police station. Right now, it's part of a constellation of municipal buildings. The federal court is down there, the district court. It's down sort of in the sort of governmental core of Brattleboro. The police is also in the building with the municipal center. Does the police provide any security to the functioning of the municipal center? Is that an issue? And just the convenience of having the police department near courts and other, the Vermont Health Department is right next door. There's sort of a constellation of services around all of those institutions. And by moving the police department out separately, mostly for cost savings, which is, I'm not belittling cost savings, but have you thought systematically about some of the other connections and, being near those other institutions as a public, as a function of public safety? And I'd really like you to also comment on security for the municipal center itself and having that, the police being away from that center. So could you comment on that? I think you covered very well the issue of a call from a member of the public, wherever they are in the area, but just if you could address that other issue of the current location of the police department. Thank you.
Sure. For our location in reference to the courts, that has no bearing on where the actual building is. As for the security, the municipal center, to be perfectly honest with you, I think us being there brings more problems to the municipal center than it solves. It's not an adequate facility, it's wide open, and, we introduce more issues. And your other question, I'm sorry, the courts, the security?
No, I think that was about it. So there's no real advantage to being in proximity to these other state and judicial centers and everything.
No, sir.
Before I sit down, I would just make one comment that I share a lot of the anxiety that other people have expressed about Brattleboro getting into the vagaries of renting property. And I get a little nervous having a property like the Reformer building coming off of the grand list, because that's been an ongoing problem that we face every year in town meeting about revenue, and for us to now be purchasing a building that's been on the grand list, all of that gives me anxiety. Thank you.
We have the mold figure, which would be on the order of $50,000 to $75,000 for the mold remediation.
Gene?
Jean Keywell, District 3. I have a question and a comment. My question is that I do not see on the list of critical needs for the police department one that I know exists, which is a secure place for victims and citizen witnesses to wait out of public view. And I want to know if that is being provided in either of the facility places. And my comment is that I think it would be great to have a state-of-the-art police facility wherever it is, but I am queasy about removing this vital service center from our town core. It just, it doesn't feel right. As I drive around New England and go into various towns, the difference between the towns that have beautiful municipal campuses outside on the outskirts of town, it's a whole different feel of a town. Like in Manchester, for example, they have a beautiful municipal campus north of their town, and it just feels like something's missing from the core of their town. So, thank you.
I'll just say quickly that having a separate location for victims and witnesses to meet securely and not have to be in the public is part of the plans, whether it's at the municipal center or at the Reformer building. George? Over here on the left. We're taking people who are still making their first comments.
George the First.
Yeah.
District 1. I just had a kind of procedural question. When we go for the special meeting, are we going to be there for 6 hours hearing 100+ comments and then going to vote Australian ballot?
We're
Will there
allowed
be
to start
discussion?
voting right away, right? At 10 a.m. We're allowed to start voting at 10 a.m.
Okay.
And to start voting as soon as there's a quorum.
And a clarification on that, a question was asked to me on the side about whether debate had to cease when voting started. That did used to be the rule, but it is no longer the rule. So if debate is continuing at 10 a.m., it can continue, but the polls will open at 10 a.m. for people to actually fill out the ballot.
Dave?
I'm Dave Emery from District 3. I have a couple comments and a question. First of all, a lot of the PDs, if you go around into some of our very close towns, if you go to Keene, the PD is no longer downtown. Greenfield is not downtown. You go to Hartford, Vermont, it's not downtown. And they get along extremely well, and they're happy that it's not there. But it is time. It is time. We are at the 11th hour. We have pushed this off for, well, I can tell you, 30 years for sure. And Chief Fitzgerald, Chief Guthrie would be proud of you to hear you say about foot patrols and doing the community policing again. So on behalf of Chief Guthrie, I'll tell you that he's really happy to hear that. My question is the dispatch center planning to move to Putney Road? Black Mountain Road. And was there consideration when you eliminated the third floor of the fire station, I believe it was going to be the Emergency Operations Center, that could be incorporated with the PD?
The dispatch center would be located with the police department, wherever that ends up. So the plans at the municipal center include a new dispatch area, and likewise, dispatch is part of the plan if you do approve the recommendation to move to Black Mountain Road. The Emergency Operations Center is not included within the plan for the police department at either of the two locations. The difficulty we have with addressing that as part of this set of improvements is the refocusing during the year prior to when I arrived and in the part that I've been involved with for this past year or so. The focus has been on how to make sure that we meet all of the essential needs of these departments and providing their essential services to the community in the most cost-effective manner. And so that required that we not keep in the program anything that wasn't absolutely required. And the Emergency Operations Center is, in my opinion, a luxury rather than a necessity in the scope of this kind of a plan. We need to be able to function well as a team when our conditions in the community are at their worst. But you saw how well your town team responded to Hurricane Irene, Tropical Storm Irene, in really what is a pretty woeful EOC at the moment. You know that well from your experience there. But we use it so rarely, I couldn't see justifying having an expense as part of this program when we were trying to find the most affordable way for the community to move forward and provide proper facilities for basic daily functioning of the fire department and the police department. And so we cut the EOC out of the plan.
Ralph?
Thanks. Ralph Mima, District 3. It sounds to me like there's a lot of concern about the issue of leasing space, both in town and out at a Black Mountain location. And that part of the concern comes from the fact that the town would then be subject to, you know, the vagaries of being a landlord, the risk associated with leasing versus having vacant space to worry about. And another piece is the issue of low-cost commercial rental space crowding out other competing properties in town. And I'm wondering, there's nothing specific to this in the way that the article is written, but it would help me to make a decision about how I voted on the article if I could see some sort of analysis of the impact on the total economic value of the proposal with and without the rental of commercial space in both locations. I did, just flipping quickly through the book, I didn't see that analysis. But I think one option that should be on the table because of this concern about leasing is simply, you know, what would the proposal look like if there was absolutely no treatment at all of rental income, no inclusion of rental income to sort of, you know, soften the blow of costs? Would it completely eliminate the cost advantage of moving to Black Mountain Road? Would it have only a slight impact? Would it overwhelm the proposal? So I'm just wondering if that kind of analysis could be put together.
The data exists, and I can speak to it right now. It doesn't exist in that particular form that you just described. What we have in two separate locations, at least two separate locations, but what is included within the report is separate consideration of the expected rental income at the Reformer building, which is $20,000 net per year, $30,000 gross and $20,000 net. Mm-hmm. And the potential for there to be rental income at the municipal center. So in the math that's presented as part of the recommendation, we didn't assume anything at the municipal center. We believe that there would be rental income there. We believe that there are actually, I can tell you there are entities who have spoken to me about the space. So we believe we would make some income from renting some space, and it would be somewhere between $0 and $60,000 a year based on $7 a square foot. So, you know, we're not anticipating we're going to fill it all up. In fact, we're not putting any revenue figure into the overall financial analysis because we didn't feel like that was a fair thing to do when it's speculation, even if it's educated speculation. At the Reformer, we have $20,000 of net rental income each year because that's the estimate of what we would receive through that those tentative lease terms that are attached to the option to purchase. And if that, after 3 years or one of the 3-year extensions that are provided for in that documentation, if that income were to go away, then the overall analysis of the financial advantage of going north would be diminished by $20,000 per year.
Do you look at it in like a net present value over 20 years or something like that to come up with a present economic value of that? Or?
We didn't, but we didn't do that with the debt service either, or any of the other aspects of this. So I think isolating that one particular piece and running a net present value analysis wouldn't be appropriate.
I'm just wondering if you completely removed the prospect of the 20,000 and net rental income at Black Mountain Road from the analysis.
Yes.
You know, how much less attractive would the proposal look? That's and we don't have to discuss that anymore here, but I think it'd be great to have a bit more detailed treatment of that for the 12th.
Okay. We'll
Thanks.
do that.
I want to see if anybody has not yet spoken. Is anybody who has not yet spoken who has something to ask? All right, seconds. Over here. George, too.
Thank you for, first of all, thank you all for the work that we can see has gone into this. And I have been reading about it. And thank you for the answer to my question earlier. But that prompts actually this comment. From what I've seen at the Reformer, if they could have sold that building for $750,000, we wouldn't be here tonight discussing this. I don't think there's a market for the building, and quite frankly, I think we could have done a lot better on the deal. What I'd rather see is buy the building for $1 and let them lease that space for free.
Stevens?
Bob Stevens, District 2. I just, Peter, wanted to follow up on the answer to that you gave a minute ago about the, I'm not sure I understand. In the memo on page 48, this seems to be saying that the expected operational cost of the Reformer building is $60,000 a year. And the reason that isn't counted as an additional expense is that it's offset by the revenue from the rentals from the municipal center, which is approximately $60,000 a year.
No.
Did I misunderstand that?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
What it's offset by is the reduction in the debt service cost to be at Black Mountain as compared to the debt service cost for the municipal center. So there is reference to the potential for receiving revenue of up to $60,000 a year. That's what I just mentioned in the 0 to 60.
Yeah.
You know, 0 if we lease nothing, 60 if we lease it all continuously. Obviously, the real number would be someplace in between at the municipal center, but that's not factored into this.
So what you're saying then is the $60,000 additional operational cost at the Reformer is equal to the $1 million of savings you have in the construction at Black Mountain Road. So there is no $1 million savings. There's no $1 million savings if you're spending another $60,000 a year in operational costs instead of using that $60,000 to pay the additional $1 million in debt.
There's $1 million a year in capital savings, which then reduces the amount of debt service funding that's required. What the analysis on page 48 indicates is that amount of savings in debt service is roughly equal to the carrying cost of having a separate building. So that about washes out.
So
right?
Just to
and
restate,
then separate and apart from that, the rental income of $20,000 versus the
taxes,
the loss of the $20,000 a year in taxes about washes out. And where that leaves us is that any rental income, since those two factors net out to zero, any rental income at the municipal center in the space that would be vacated would tip the scales to it being a net positive.
So let me restate that to make sure I understand it.
Sure.
What you're saying then, because we've been saying all night that there's $1 million of savings to go to Putney Road or to go to Black Mountain Road.
Right.
When in fact the net effect on the taxes is there's no savings for that $1 million because the reduction in your taxes for the bond payment of the $1 million is then chewed up by your operating costs on Black Mountain Road. So that washes. The only savings you would have is if you rented space in the municipal center. That's what you just said.
I think you have used different words to say the same thing I was trying to say.
Right,
Yes.
and I think the way I'm understanding it is that there really isn't $1 million savings between those two alternatives. That's what the conclusion that I'm coming to.
See, that's where we're saying it differently. I believe there's every bit $1 million savings, but that capital savings relates very directly to a known cost of borrowing, where the carrying cost of the operations and maintenance at the building is both currently an estimate rather than a known cost, and something that we have relatively more control over in terms of an annual budget expense. So the reason that I've been referring to it in the documents all along and this evening as approximately a wash, they basically wash each other out. I don't think you can be so precise as to say it absolutely is this or it absolutely is that, because one is a known calculable figure and the other is an estimate and flexible figure. I think it's responsible to say that they're approximately equal to each other.
I think I understand. Thank you.
I want to thank everybody for, one more. Yes, Daniel.
Again, Daniel Kasnitz, District 1. I think from the beginning, the Select Board and the Town Manager have been very clear that the $1 million is effectively a wash. And when I spoke before, I said, and I think the consideration of that $1 million and the consideration of whether or not we're landlords is really secondary and almost a red herring. The question is, what is the best, most effective, affordable operation of the police department? And it seems very clear that the professionals have come down on the side of moving to Black Mountain, and that if there is no savings, if the rental space stays empty, even if it's more expensive, what is our goal here? Proper operation of that department, or avoiding our fears of speculative things upon speculative things? Sure, stay out of the landlord business. Let's focus on the goal here, which my understanding is we should be looking at a good, effective home for the police department. And I think that we have a pretty good course there after a long period of letting our speculative fears wag the dog.
Yes, you had your hand up before, and then they took it down.
Margot Kuhn-Schmidt, District 1. I don't believe any of us would be here if the only consideration was what, we think is best for the police department. I think that we're all here because we care about the town of Brattleboro and what is best for not only the police department of Brattleboro, but the people of Brattleboro and the future of the town of Brattleboro. So, I appreciate your comment, but I also believe that there's obviously more to take into consideration, especially considering what everybody said tonight.
Last comment.
Eric Schmidt again, District 1. I'll be very quick. I just wanted to echo and thank Bob for clarifying that. Though I hear that the board and you didn't mean to say that it wasn't a wash, some of the comments made like, hey, in Black Mountain it's even cheaper. There were some comments made that this is the cheaper option, and again, thank you so much for bringing it up. It's not. So I just want to say that at least one other person in here was under the impression that this was the cheaper option, where that isn't actually the case. So I just wanted to echo that. Thank you.
Any other comments? I want to thank everybody for coming. Please come back on Saturday, the 12th at 8:30 in the morning, and we'll be having another informational meeting next Wednesday about the budget and other matters on for March 19th. Thank you. We have a motion to adjourn?
Yeah.